Hello, how are you? My name is Kemdi. I'm the co-founder CEO of Versus Africa. And today my presentation will be covering how the African consumer market dictates global innovation for the AI Expo event. I do hope you enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to all your questions, feedback, and points of analysis after my presentation. So I'm just going to go ahead now and share my screen. All right. Now, let's begin. I'm going to go ahead and start off by introducing what I call the inevitables. And please excuse my fanatic ways of the MCU characters, the universe, actually. I'm a big fan of comics, and any opportunity for me to put in any of my favorite characters or things in presentations, I tend to do that to entertain the audience. So hope you enjoy this. But anyways, this is Thanos saying, I am inevitable when he has all the stones. But what I want to do here is introduce what would be the three main things that makes the African consumer market inevitably strong to be in a position to dictate what is global innovation, whether it's now, what we're seeing with certain industries are already showing that, or even where we see the data heading us towards. All right, now the first inevitable is the mobile devices. I think this one's a clear one. And I think it's safe to say across the world, wherever we are, there's a high level of dependency on mobile devices, and there's a high penetration rate across key consumer markets, key economies, etc. So when looking at some of the hard truths about where we are with mobile devices, there's over 2.7 billion smartphone users across the world. 10% of these people are known to check their phones every 4 minutes. Again, that stickiness with these mobile devices is very clear, and that consumer behavior is across the world. On average, that's about 47 times a day, 18,000 a year, give or take. Now, the average time spent is about 5 hours per day. And this is, again, across big markets, Brazil, China, US, just to name a few. But the idea really is that a lot of these people in the mobile device usership, in this case, the users of mobile devices, are using a lot of apps. They're spending much time on apps. Consumer average also, for a lot of the consumers average at least 245 billion app download annually, which of course, shows the immense value that apps are now having towards, even just businesses, and how they've also shifted into this massive opportunity. Now, mobile apps are also performing really great, which almost $188.9 billion in revenue to account for, as far as the estimate that it has grossed in recent times. So it's very clear that, obviously, there's a big market here. And it's also known that smartphone users spend 38% of their mobile app time on social networking and music apps, which obviously also shows where the opportunity lies for a lot of people who are building or going into the app business, who want to basically incorporate some of those trends and things they see from the social networking apps that are working and doing very well, and also the music apps as well. One key thing to note is obviously the big sort of usership that's coming from the younger population, the 18 to 24-year-olds in particular, which kind of also fall into what I say is the Gen Y, Gen Z consumer population. They are known to spend 66% of their digital media time using smartphone apps, which brings me to the next inevitable, which is the Gen Z. Now, the Gen Z are obviously the most important group of consumers now that a lot of brands are basically looking and pointing towards in terms of how they're building and customizing their goods, services, or whatever products they may have in the market. This is a very great summary that is very popular also amongst a lot of consultants, done by the McKinsey Group, where it just shows a very quick, easy sort of profile on what is the baby boomer to the Gen Z and sort of the evolution of consumers. Now, for this presentation, I'm just going to be mainly focused on the Gen Z, a bit on the Gen Y as well, because they do have a very intricate role they've played into how the Gen Z also do interact with a lot of the apps and technology and all of the mobile device, usership and a lot of other things that comes with innovation. They've also been the ones to almost lead the Gen Z into some of these traits that we see. But just to highlight a few of the things on the Gen Z side, we do know that they are digital natives born into the internet. They also are very deep into the social networks. In terms of behavior, they tend to be communaholics, which pretty much means they value communication in the most honest, transparent way. They're very dialogue oriented. So they like to almost, again, express themselves. They tend to be very open-mic'd, for lack of better words. They also are very ethical and unique in the sense where they want to almost have a very genuine interaction with the consumer products that they come in and services that they also come in contact with. So they tend to be very good folks that you get pure unadulterated feedback from if you're a brand working with the Gen Z consumer side. So more on this Gen Z phenomenon, right? So something that obviously is very clear is that the more time spent on mobile devices is clearly showing this major shift, whether it's from a business culture, general culture, or even just technology shift. Then you also have the Gen Y, like I mentioned earlier, they actually played a very huge role in driving the innovation that came with that shift, while the Gen Z were obviously born into it. So you do see where the Gen Y actually play a very key role in almost being leaders into giving ideas and almost helping with Gen Z and their innovation, their creativity, and somewhat of their fight and raspiness, for lack of better words, to actually help them, bring about sustainable, businesses and innovation. Because the Gen Y have seen what it looks like before and when it's during, and so when the Gen Z are born into it, the Gen Y have a bit more perspective, so they help with balance. Now, these trends have mostly shaped the known patterns of the Gen Y and the Gen Z, obviously, where from the era of the emergence of the internet to the stickiness of social media networks, these two groups are essentially known to be very compatible, work well together, understand each other very well, given that they're very close to that same boom of the technology age. And it's also very key to note that 93% of today's purchases globally are actually influenced by the Gen Z, especially services and goods regarding travel, food, household goods, and furniture. Now, more on the Gen Z phenomenon. Like I said, they have a tendency to be very open-ended with their communication. They are very ethical. That brings about the impact that they want to have on the world. They're very bold and will fight for justice. So what I did here was I kind of gave some sort of visual depictions of some of these traits. You have Malala, who is clearly in the Gen Z population, or part of the Gen Z population, who clearly wants to have impact on the world with her experience and her fight, and also even just her share strength as a woman, just opening up and basically going against what she feels are not, or things that are against her values. And then we have the fictional character whose Arya Starks from the Game of Thrones, the popular show, who is also seen as one who fights for justice, and in this case, on the fictional sense, is fighting for the throne to represent her family, and is not scared to basically be a woman doing it as well, and doing it very well, because she did kick a lot of ass. But yeah, and they do tend to have a low attention span with the inundation of information that's available to them. And one thing we see as well with the Gen Z is their immense sort of consumption of social media, with Instagram ranking the highest out of the others that are Snapchat, Facebook, and Twitter. Now, the third inevitable are the emerging economies, which are BRICS, and I'm also including Africa. I'm just going to run through a few of the things that we all may already know about the BRICS economies, but just to kind of refresh. So we know BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, 40% of the world's population makes up BRICS, and China is the one that essentially is the biggest of the five, which is 1.4 billion in population size. Okay. As demand gets stagnant in more developed markets, these emerging markets, BRICS, and I'm including Africa, Africa with almost 1.2 billion in the population, offer massive opportunities for consumer good companies or anyone who has any sort of business into investing and expanding markets, right? Some of the trends that are very Common are the upward growth in middle class, which also shows disposable income rising, which helps to also serve as an indicator for businesses who want to come in and expand into new markets in the BRICS or Africa. And we have also India, who is the second of the BRICS in GDP-wise with $5.2 trillion, and South Africa being the smallest of BRICS, but definitely a force nonetheless in the Middle East and Africa region. All right. So again, just wanted to make sure I gave sort of context on the BRICS side, because again, it's good to see from the macro perspective what these major emerging markets do, and then kind of bringing it back home to what we would then sort of hone in on. Then just looking again at the new generation of our consumers, which are our Gen Z. In the US, Europe, and BRICS, they make up about 40% of the consumers and worldwide, and 10% of the rest of the world, right? Now, buying power of these very, very influential consumer group, the Gen Z now, is 44 billion, and another 600 billion considering the influence of their parent spending. So if they're not spending, or in this case, having the actual access to the money, they are very big in influencing what people around them can spend. So they have a very, very big part that they play in our markets today. Now, I just wanted to basically hone in again on the internet penetration, because this again has a lot to do with where innovation is being tapped into. Because of course, we've just identified the mobile devices, hence access to internet, and how there's a lot of interaction with apps and things of that nature. So it's good to see where a lot of these countries also kind of rank in terms of internet penetration. And what we found out from doing our versus research was that Russia has the strongest internet penetration rate at almost 85% to its total population. Brazil, China, India, and South Africa then follow respectively. Now, in Africa, Nigeria ranks the highest in penetration rate and nearly 70% to its massive population size at roughly 200 million people. Nigeria also ranks 6th in the overall global index when using the volume of actual users against its population size. So that even is more than big economies, including Russia, Germany, and the United Kingdom. So then now we're going back to Africa's existence and why it's very, very key in looking at how it's going to drive that global innovation. Like we mentioned, seeing that the penetration rate is really becoming higher and it's growing at a very fast exponential rate. So it's good to sort of note that with the data. Now, we've heard the Africa rising theme. Africa is a very, very big continent. It is one of the fastest growing consumer markets in the world still, growing at an average rate of 2.2%, more than twice that of Asia. It is also the current youngest population in the world, with average of 50% of its population under the age of 18. This is a very key stat because going back to the second inevitable, our Gen Z, it does obviously clearly show that Africa will very much hold the greater population of Gen Z and hence have a very big impact on the influence thereafter. Now, looking at household consumption, even increasing, and some of the things around consumer expenditure, even though a lot of the key sort of African countries are still not meeting some of their economic sort of targets in terms of prosperity, they still have a very, very high consumer expenditure rate, and even more expectations as they grow to about 2.1 trillion within the next few years. Now, by 2030, there's estimates that the largest consumer markets will include Nigeria, Egypt, and South Africa. And of course, it doesn't leave out the lucrative opportunities that will be in other African countries like Angola, Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, and Rwanda. So we'll just go through a few more key things that also does help to see the opportunities that may be for certain industries and things as the Africa Rising theme continues. Mostly in the FMCG space, they're the ones who see a lot of success given that they are able to meet the lower purchasing power of the African consumer. So they're able to present low-cost products with short shelf lives that are constantly in high demand, such as consumables and cleaning products. And then, of course, the telco market is very huge. It's basically the key market, one of the biggest ones driving the African economy forward. And it's safe to say that because of this, 2 out of 3 Africans now have internet access. So 75% of whom are reporting going online on a daily basis. Again, going back to those stats, about 5 hours a day. Now you see the connectivity has even surpassed 80% in many of the countries within Africa. So Africa, again, is showing that exponential growth because the emergence of technology and the internet is becoming more of a dependency, and hence a need, or not even just a want, and it's helping to also leapfrog a lot of the things that are not readily available infrastructurally to be still able to do some things and prosper economically. And then again, just looking at more signals, the increase in urbanization is clearly showing. We're seeing that there's an additional 187 million Africans that are expected to reside in cities within the next decade, and almost 800 more people will be consolidated into Africa's urban megacenters. So all the trends are showing, and it's already happening, and we're seeing it live. Africa's 5 largest consumer markets alone, according to the African Development Bank, estimates that in the coming years, there'll be 56 million middle-class households with disposable incomes of nearly $680 billion. So again, opportunity is high, opportunity is big, it's there. And so once these young population of consumers start to influence this and actually start to realize and actually actualize these estimates, it's very clear that the influence will be huge. Right? And just quickly running through this, not going to go too much into it, but again, it's just giving more sort of insights into the key industries and some of the traits on the African side of things, and how even the formal financial development in sub-Saharan Africa is among the lowest. But again, because of the folks that don't have access to traditional banking, mobile devices have become a very key way of getting them banked. So we're seeing now how even places like Kenya and how they're utilizing the M-Pesa and mobile money, how it's becoming such a great innovation to get people banked and hence traced, and then money's being moved and the economy again flowing. That's a huge, huge innovation that has also transcended and even sometimes duplicated in other parts of even larger economies. The informal market is overwhelmingly still dominating in Africa. In Nigeria, you still have so many of these tabletop vendors, as well as also some of Africa's foremost emerging markets, including Ghana, Cameroon, Ethiopia, and Egypt. And something to note is that brand recognition is still very high in the priority of African buyers. So multinationals are almost poised to be in a strong point of profitability if they're meeting a lot of these African buyers' needs. And what I did was I just decided to sort of use some examples of some of the admired brands in Africa, according to some poll that was done by the Brand Africa 100 group. And it shows like big brands like Nike, Apple, Dangote, MTN, Samsung, Tecno, ShopRite. And the top 5 reasons why a lot of the consumers in Africa love these brands is, number 1, they're trusted. Obviously, they're popular, meaning that they're in the market, they can get further feedback from other people, so that the transparency helps. They're proven, they're quality, and most importantly, they're affordable. So now we've seen the Gen Z as a whole. We've kind of looked at sort of the macro statistics of how the Gen Z are globally and what happens, out there. Some of the estimates that we're seeing, and they're a huge influence. Now we then go into Gen Z in Africa, the youngest population in the world, and what they are, how are they different in this case? Now, it's very clear that unlike the Gen Z in the more developed world, the Africa Gen Z would be dealing with basic challenges still. Africa isn't still as progressed as it should, as some of these key economies are still facing, infrastructural challenges, including lack of electricity, sanitation, hence health issues, public health as well. And of course, dependable education, and even to some degree, digital technologies being available. However, it's still very clear that when they do catch on to some of these new innovations, especially in technology, they catch on very quick. All right. And I'm going to show you some examples as we go into a bit of the specifics as to the global influence that this group of people, regardless of some of their setbacks, still are clearly influencing with innovation. Now, with the natural affinity and dependency to leapfrog with these issues for technology alongside the millennials, like I mentioned, Africa's youth drive massive, massive digital innovation, which presents to them employment opportunities and socioeconomic development for their countries within. So I'm going to highlight just one great example from a global influence perspective in tech talent, which is a great transition from what I just mentioned with the employment. So Ndela is a very foremost brand who started this wonderful business of discovering talents within Africa and essentially placing them in the biggest tech companies across Europe and the US. And most of them were largely doing so from their homes in Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, Rwanda, and Uganda, right? Now, this opened up so many opportunities where the tech talent were now exposed to bigger projects, but again, they were not in any way, shape, or form limited in what they were able to do or even to integrate with a lot of these big firms, because they showed again that regardless of their setbacks with infrastructure, it wasn't also going to limit them in terms of how much they could also contribute to innovations across the world. With this even transcended with the entrepreneurial scene. And some of these tech talents, if they were not doing work for a lot of these big brands, were creating some novel products across key industries from healthcare to financial services, education, and even energy. Now, with the African Gen Y and the Gen Z represented the youngest population in the world, obviously here you can see how innovation in technology has also shown their clear input into, at least meeting some of the innovations from the world, from the global quota, and how a lot of their innovations have even been somewhat duplicated by others in the global scene. Some of the ones that I mentioned, including the mobile banking I mentioned earlier with M-Pesa, and even some in telemedicine, especially after COVID, a lot of great innovations came up with a lot of, and a lot of healthcare startups emerged and raised tons and tons of money to drive innovation to help even with the fight against COVID. Now, some more traits on the tech talents. One of the things that we know for sure is that the African Gen Z see data, in this case, data is also synonymous to internet, as a commodity and not just an allowance. It's a very big need. And so usually, the only constraints they go through is affordability, especially when they're consuming social networks that do take a lot of internet space and usage, like Instagram. Now, one of the key things that are very attractive about the African Gen Z is that they're multilingual. So outside of English, they speak other African languages that are spoken by tons of other Africans, like Pidgin English, Swahili, Amharic, Yoruba, Oromo, Hausa, Igbo, Zulu, Shona, Arabic, Portuguese, and even French. African Gen Zs are very entrepreneurial. They are very confident in their approach. Again, aligning with a lot of the very general traits that we saw from the McKinsey profile table. And they're less likely to want to work for a boss, but again, doesn't mean that they wouldn't, but they are very much driven by entrepreneurial activities and sort of the things that would allow them to have some autonomy in what they do. They can also be impatient, again, hard to please, kind of like what we sort of also deduced from the profile. When you have very open-ended communaholics tend to be sometimes very impatient and stuck to their ways. But one thing that is sort of common, and from some of the feedback from even brands I've worked with some of the African Gen Zs, is that they are dynamic and adapt to change easily, which again is still a very great trait. Another major influence, which was very recent, was with digital currencies, cryptocurrency in particular. Now, this is showing a bit of our snippets from the Versus Consumer Insights report we did earlier this year. And we saw that from the top countries that we gathered that were very active in Bitcoin trade, we saw that 3 African countries made it to the top 10. And Nigeria led the way. Actually, it was second right after the US with nearly over 500 million in value, which was even larger than other big economies like China and the United Kingdom. Now you wonder, how come a poor country, lack of infrastructure, all these things are still very much very active in the cryptocurrency space? What's, that doesn't really, tally up, right? But no, again, with the access to the internet and some of the mobile device, the mobile device penetration, all those things we have already cited, it's not even a question that Nigeria would be there. Of course, with their large population size, we saw that. And I think just even looking closely at what we then did, which was a very interesting poll we took, because it was clear that the trends were showing that Nigerians preferred crypto as their #1 option for investment because of the clear high returns and quick returns that people were reporting. And we then confirmed that when we did the poll. And it shows here that when we did a 1,000 respondent sample size poll, 30% of Nigerians chose cryptocurrency as their preferred investment option. Now, check this out. Ages 16 to 40, obviously, which makes up largely the Gen Y, Gen Z, drove those numbers up. So it was actually mainly respondents that were over 45, which were probably the earlier generations who chose investment options, other ones as their primary. So such things as stock market equities, fixed income, real estate, etc. They chose those over cryptocurrency. But we're seeing, again, this is a clear cut example about how the African consumer market, in this case, is dictating global innovation, when you're seeing the large number of these Gen Z activated for digital currency, and even to some degree pushing that economy forward. And this is another great one, which is music. So Afrobeats is very popular. People, you cannot see, I would say roughly, music as an export is probably, getting as close to what oil is as an export for Nigeria. There's no doubt that it's huge, it's big, it's very much consuming the airwaves. Gave some examples here with one of the biggest artists out now with Drake. So his Afrobeat song called One Dance is still one of the top 5 most streamed songs in the world. It's 2.1 billion strong right now in terms of the number of streams. And it's obviously showing just the big influence that the Gen Z, who are the ones who are, again, influencing music globally, are showing that they can add to the streams and obviously push those numbers higher for whenever a big artist wants to collaborate with another big artist from the region. In this case, it was Wizkid, and that already shot up his numbers. So this is actually Drake, who's a very big artist, very well-known popularly. His #1 song is primarily driven by the Gen Z consumers in Africa, who also love Wizkid, and obviously have now driven his numbers up, and now he is, the #1. He's probably the #1, and I'll also fact check this, but African-American, as far as the top 5 is concerned, for top streams. And that obviously has been attributed to the African sound and Afrobeats, which is great. So while developing solutions, knowing these inevitables, that's where we come in, tracking, monitoring a lot of these so we can see more of these innovations. So we have the mobile devices we talked about, we have the Gen Z phenomenon, and last but not least, we have Africa and the BRICS, and just seeing some of the statistics and some of the trends that we know are now happening, and even some of the things that we know is inevitable, which is the consumer expenditure growing and things like that. That's why we created Versus. So this is where I get to plug in what we do. So we actually are tackling the problem of the lack of African consumer data available to brands locally and globally. We do realize that it's a problem, and it's very hard for people to see the opportunity and be able to talk with confidence like I'm doing right now for the audience. Now, versus what we do is combine online, offline methods using our proprietary listen and ask methodologies to give brands complete actionable insights on this African market opportunity. So we want brands to take advantage of the inevitable growth that Africa presents and understanding the mobile-centric Gen Z population by using our tools that allow for brands to actually ask questions and get responses, whether it's by text, image, video, audio, we do it all. And that's really great because brands can now interact in real time with questions and surveys they have for these African consumers. And understanding the emerging trends and anticipating new innovations obviously puts a lot of companies or people who have interest in doing business in the continent very, very unique, give them a unique edge. And through our patented local language social sentiment analysis, our social analysis, sentiment analysis, or social listening sentiment analysis, excuse me, it helps to also let brands real time also gather what might be things that are going on online in social media, even news or blogs or forums, unconventional ones, sources that might not be available with other potential Western brands. But we just try to be a little bit more proactive in understanding the local language nuances that might be spoken on all these platforms, including the popular ones, the less popular ones, but more popular within those regions that you're focused on. So like we'll try to get deeper into Kenya, we'll try to get deeper into South Africa, we'll try to get deeper into Ethiopia eventually. So we're building really just what would be a pure, unique African-based tool to help you understand this massive market opportunity, knowing it's very complex and not usually a one-to-one, so to speak. So that's why we're here. So we definitely should not ignore these inevitables. African consumers are a force and need to be better understood. So that's why we're here, so we can help connect and collaborate. So this is where I'd love to get questions, points of analysis, or feedback. It's been lovely doing this presentation, and I hope you all learned a bit more about the African consumer opportunity.